Okay, thanks everybody for tuning in. We're going to be talking about chapter 13 today. And I want to just set the tone. With this video, we start sort of turning a corner because for the last couple modules, we focus only on creating your informative speech. I know some people get really nervous about giving speeches, but my classes typically do really well because I create the quizzes and the homework assignments to help you walk through each step of the speech process. So if you've been feeling overwhelmed or stressed, I would say don't worry about it. Do the reading, that will really help. And of course, the assignments will help. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the speech preparation process. We'll talk about how to choose a speech topic, how to do what we call an audience analysis. We'll talk about how to do research and avoiding plagiarism. As I mentioned, this visual that you see here on the speech preparation process is actually included in chapter 16, but since we're talking about starting the speech process, I'd like to include it here as we talk about chapter 13. The very first thing that most people skip, but is the most important thing to do, is to just think about your topic. Think about what do you already know about and want to know more about, but also what makes sense for the audience to know about. The audience is really, I guess, the biggest determinant when you're trying to figure out what to do. Do I do this or do I do that? Consider your audience. What makes the most sense for the audience? Because without an audience, you're not giving a speech. You are just talking, right? So there's a lot of thought that should go into even just choosing your topic, starting there. The second step would be to investigate. Start doing some research. You will have to do research for your speech. You'll need 3 sources, and all this is talked about in the description. You will need 3 sources, but they don't have to be academic. They just have to be credible, which we'll talk about in a minute. So you think about it, you do some research, then you start composing your speech. For our class, and what's true in public speaking classes, composing a speech really means writing an outline. And an outline is just going to have key terms and short phrases. I will give you an outline template so you don't have to start from scratch. And I will give you an example, a good student example to follow. The fourth step is really just on your own, and that is rehearsing. Very similar word. And then the last step would be revising. Based on rehearsing, you have to figure out, ooh, do I have enough content or do I need to have more? Did that example make sense for the audience or no? So there is a process. I think most people probably skip steps 1 and 2 and go right into step 3 and just start maybe writing a paper. But I want to be clear, that's not what we're doing. You're going to eventually write an outline, but first we will want you to think about your topic. In thinking about your topic, you'll see there are 3 main types of speeches. There's an informative speech, which is what we are doing. We are only giving an informative speech in our class. That's it. You're providing information to people. I'm being really clear, trying to be really clear about that because most people end up wanting to choose something they're passionate about, which is great, but then they make it what we would call a persuasive speech, which is when you try to get your audience to do or think something differently. So if you want me to follow a paleo diet because it's worked so well for you, that's persuasive. If you want to just tell me about the paleo diet, then that's informative. The third main type of speech is like a special occasion, and that's when you are giving an award or maybe giving a toast. So those are the 3 main types. Your choice for this class, based on our main class objectives, is to give an informative speech. And we talk more about that in this presentation, and then also when we talk about chapter 16, which I will talk about next, slightly out of order, but intentionally. So we said, okay, the very first step is in the process is to start thinking. Brainstorming is recommended. That's when you give yourself a set time, like 5 or 10 minutes, and you just start listing things that come to your mind without censoring yourself or limiting yourself. So if I were thinking about things that are just in my environment, I might say book. Oh, and then I might list 4 different books that are on my mind, or I might list 1, and then I go over to water bottle, and then I start talking some things about water. And they're just a list. It doesn't matter what I write down when I'm brainstorming. Just get your thoughts on paper or type them out. You have an option also called a concept map or a web. It's called a lot of different things, but this example is what you see here and is pictured in our book. You start with your very first idea, you kind of put it in the middle of the page, and then you just start branching out from there and see where your ideas take you. If you are more of a visual learner, this concept map might be an easier way to go. So you'll see this person who was brainstorming with a concept map probably started with the word Apple computers or the phrase. And then from there, the person said, "Ooh, I could talk about software. And speaking of software, I could talk about an iPhoto or an iMovie or GarageBand." And then maybe they hopped over to devices and didn't add anything yet. And then maybe they hopped over to history. And you see this person didn't end up getting more detailed about history because as they were thinking, he or she was thinking, decided, meh, I don't want that. But then if you look to the right side, you can see when the person wrote down iTunes, there are a lot of ideas coming from that. So the person could look at this concept map and think, okay, either my topic is going to be Apple computers, and then I pick 3 of these other smaller ideas to be my main points, or I have so much to say just about iTunes. Maybe my topic is iTunes, and some of these surrounding ideas like movies, radio, and books, those become my main points. So whichever method you choose to use, I do recommend that you spend some time thinking about your topic. Your topic for our class, again, has to be informative. It cannot be persuasive. The only topic that's off the table is anything related to CBD, marijuana, cannabis, anything like that. And it's not because I don't think there's interesting information there. It's because in the 20 or so years I've been teaching, I've never had a speech that was really well put together on that topic. And I just can't hear it anymore. So I'm taking that one idea completely off the table. Everything else, I mean, yeah, it needs to be appropriate, but whatever you want. Okay. So that's how you could start thinking about it. The next thing you want to do, as I mentioned earlier, is think, okay, now that I've got some ideas in mind, what makes sense for my audience? We don't always have the opportunity to analyze our audience. Maybe, I do a lot of consulting work, I think I've mentioned, and I don't always know who's in the room. I know they might be, managers from this company, or it could be, one time I went to like a health facility, um, and that's all I really knew. It was people who did cleaning and people who did front office, people who did back office. So there was a wide range of people. So I couldn't really analyze my audience, but in this case, you can have somewhat of an idea if you think about what we refer to as demographics of the typical college student at Scottsdale. We know that for the most part, they're going to be in Arizona because they have to be in Arizona to take classes at Scottsdale. And by the way, that's what demographics are. They're categories, or if you were to look at a job application and you have all those little boxes to check, those would be demographics: age, sex, gender, income level, financial status, that kind of thing. Those are boxes to check, which don't get me started on whether or not those are fair or accurate. That's a separate conversation. But it's just ways of thinking about who are you talking to, what age people. We know that the average age, college age of students is about 26. We know that it's probably 50-50 men and women. We do know there could be working professionals since it's an online class, right? So there are some analysis that we can make even if you're not in a class where you get to talk with each other. Psychographics is another way to analyze our audience, which is to think about their attitudes, values, and beliefs. One thing we know about everybody in our class is they probably value education. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in our class. We don't really know, though, that much about other people's attitudes and beliefs. But one thing I can tell you from an audience perspective is that having done this for a lot of years and having a lot of majors in any given class, what might make sense for you in terms of, oh, I want to talk about all this cool stuff with astronomy. We're not all astronomy or even science majors. So consider, if you want to share something about astronomy, you have to really bring it down to the very basic entry level or introductory basic terms so that we can understand, because we don't already know a lot of the things you know as someone who's a science major. Okay, and that can apply to any major. So really think through that in terms of, oh gosh, how much does my audience already know? How much do they need to know? your speech is only going to be about 4 minutes. So you really can't get very technical or complicated in about 4 minutes anyway, right? That's the other sort of constraint. The other parameter for your topic is that, again, it needs to be appropriate for the classroom. I won't be entertaining or grading speeches that are inappropriate for, if we couldn't talk about it in a college classroom without people feeling uncomfortable, then we don't want to have a speech about it either. That almost never happens. I think I've had it happen once, maybe twice in 20 years, but I always just want to set that, like we talked about before, as a norm or an expectation for our speeches. Definitely keep it appropriate. Here are some examples of purpose statements that you could be thinking about. The purpose statement for our class is really just to shape the starting point of your speech, right? So everybody's going to be informing. We already know that because that's the type of speech we're giving. But it helps you think through what is it you want to inform us about. So you'll see an example of to inform my class on the impact of Bauhaus on typography. Okay, just be careful with impact. If you start sharing things that sound like you need me to change my mind, then you are persuading me. Okay, so this is just an example of ways that you could frame your topic in your mind so that as you start creating your outline, which we talk about in future chapters, that you're really clear about what you're talking about. Okay, and mentioned we were going to talk about research. I also let you know you don't have to have academic sources, which means you don't have to go through our library, but I will be opening some modules for you guys that talk about, how to do research with Scottsdale's library, either virtually or in person. So those resources are there. Librarians are there. If you do want to use this speech as an opportunity to do research on something you would need to know for your major or for some other occasion in life, you do have access to librarians. So again, the kinds of questions you'll see here are audience focused, right? What does my audience already know? What do they need to know? What's appropriate for my audience? I will say that in terms of when you do start doing research, especially from an academic perspective, but this is generally true as well, generally your sources need to be within the last 5 years. And that's just because beyond 5 years, we don't even know if it's relevant anymore. The only time I can think of when you would use something that's older is if you want to refer back to the very primary source, the person who created the data in the first place, for some reason, and that original source was more than 5 years ago, then okay. For most of our purposes in this class, you're going to use websites. That's what most people choose. That's fine. .coms are fine, .govs, .edus, those are all fine. But I am going to ask that you don't use Wikipedia because that's not credible. I did say your sources have to be credible. So stay away from Wikipedia, please. And then the other thing is if you need to define a term to teach us something, that's fine. But then I would say go to your field of interest or your major and find a source within your major, like a textbook or something, to give us the definition rather than the dictionary. Because if you're going to take us down the path of astronomy, don't just tell us what the dictionary says about something. Tell us what an astronomer or some sort of scientist or somebody says about this definition, right? That just adds to your credibility, which is the whole reason we do research. The research really should be about learning what you think about a topic, and then you use the research to support your topic. Okay, this isn't like a book report where you just tell me what 3 sources say. This is you putting together your thoughts and finding sources that are credible that support your thoughts. And that's really the difference, as you see here, the difference between primary and secondary sources. I just referred to this when I said if you need a source that's many years old because it's a primary source, then okay. Secondary sources are okay too. So like if John Blackwell created an article about the formation of this rock. I don't, obviously making that up. And I like what he had to say, but even better than that, I like what Sean Smith says about John's work. So then I cite Sean Smith's research. That's okay. You just don't want to get then somebody who cited Sean's work and then somebody who cited that person's work, and now you're 5 people removed from the original source. Generally, you wouldn't do that, right? You'd try to stick as close to the original as you can. And what you see here again are types of links and resources you can use. But again, you have access to our library and you have access to our librarians. The reason you want to be doing research is to avoid something we call plagiarism. If you're not familiar with it, there are different softwares that different institutions use. I'm drawing a blank on what it's called, and I can't believe I'm drawing a blank because I've seen it so many times, where they will run the papers through it, the software, and see if it's been plagiarized. Plagiarized means you took somebody else's exact words or paraphrasing or their ideas and did not give credit. It's pretty easy to give credit. So when in doubt, just go ahead and give credit. Okay. If you're not sure how to do that, I will give you guys links to a great resource called OWL at Purdue University. They created this tool and it helps you use MLA or APA to do both in-text citations, which we'll talk about in a future video, as well as a works cited or reference page. I will tell you for our speech, I am going to look for in-text citations, which will go on your outline, but you will not have to give me a works cited or a reference page. And that's only because our course objectives don't talk about that to the extent that we would normally want that done like in an English class. Okay. So definitely be sure you cover your bases and cite sources where applicable. Alrighty, so we talked about the speech preparation process, how to choose your topic as the first part of your preparation, and analyzing your audience as part of the first part of the process, as well as your purpose statement. And then we talked about doing the research, which is again is step 2 of the process, and researching so that you can avoid plagiarism. Definitely read this chapter. Again, the reading is going to be in the homework and the quizzes will be very helpful in terms of you feeling good about how to prepare for your speech. But if you have questions, just let me know and I'm happy to help. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.